people get to know about Bharata first. Well, starting Monday, customers have had to shell out more money on household items, hotels, and bank services, among many other things, as the revised goods and services tax rates have come into effect from July 18th. The GST rates were hiked on several items at the 47th Council meet chaired by Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman last month in Chandigarh. While the GST Council proposed to withdraw tax exemptions for a few items and rate changes for others, exemption for many others were removed. The Council also decided to remove duty inversion for goods where the input taxes were higher than those on the output. In this edition of the Discourse, we'll analyze the new items that have been brought under the GST regime, where the GST regime is at, and what next. Joining me on the program today are Vineeta Hariharan, public policy expert, and Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, Government of India. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of the Discourse. All right, Mr. Shankar, let me start the program with you first. We've seen several protests, as well, because essential goods have been brought under the GST ambit if they are in a packaged form. These are goods that we consume on a daily basis. How would you look at these new changes?
One has to see the context in which this is happening. The context is one where since COVID began, public finances have been under stress. The central government has been borrowing more than it wants to borrow. The state governments have been allowed to borrow more than they were being allowed to earlier. And the fiscal deficit has been rising. So now that the economy is on the path to recovery, I think there is a premise that we need to set our house in order as far as public finances are concerned. That's one. The second is that because of imported inflation, the government has the need to take steps to mitigate the difficulties by providing relief in specific areas, whether they lower taxes on petrol and diesel, or they provide some support in cooking oil and other essential items. So when you have that context, then you start looking at ways and means of raising revenue. And GST is now the only major source of revenue shared between the central government and the state governments. So now once that objective is set that I have to raise revenue, then civil servants start looking at little items where you can get some revenue. Now in that process, it very often happens that the political sensitivity or how it will play out with ordinary people is lost sight of. And of course, sometimes it so happens that the political leadership feels that they can live with a bit of discomfort or unease. So that's what we are seeing right now. So there is the decisions taken on many little items. Maybe some of those could have been spared, or some have gotten with the political leadership feeling that we are in a difficult situation. This is some unease or unhappiness that we can live with because the larger situation demands this kind of action. But I would like to add one more point at this stage, and which is that what happens in these exercises is that we keep looking at what we can do at the margin. And we do not try and go back to the basics. So if I were to look at the basics and just make a couple of brief points at this stage. So ideally, if we want the economy to grow faster and we want to reduce the cost of doing business, we should be talking about a glide path for bringing petrol and diesel into GST, because that's a huge cost for doing business. Bringing it to GST would also have a huge impact on lowering inflation as well as inflationary expectations. You need not do it at one go, but a trajectory at least should be discussed. And the other is, we don't have a very serious discussion in this country on where we spend government money, whether we really need to spend it, whether we can again have a trajectory of reducing expenditure, or of raising taxes in more creative ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vineeta Hariharan, let me bring you into the picture now. And since we're looking at the larger picture, let's understand another aspect. Something that Mr. Shankar brought up as well. I'd like to build on that. He spoke up about the circumstances under which these particular goods and items were brought under the ambit of the GST, especially the essential goods. What does this say about the state of the economy and the state's finances as a whole?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to clarify that it's not brought, these are not brought now under the GST. These are, the categorization is important to note. I'm sure viewers would have read between the lines. It is about pre-packaged, items, pre-packaged and labeled, which is as per the Legal Metrology Act of 2009, which actually defines it very clearly as to these essential items like cereals, rice, wheat, flour, etc., which is not packed in front of the consumer. So, which is not packed in front of the consumer, but it's predefined in weight and size, and also it has a label in terms of the manufacturing date and the license, etc. Those have now come under the ambit of the GST. So, which is actually based on various industry associations and suppliers' complaints that went up to the Fitment Committee. So it was a decision taken by the Fitment Committee, which comprised various states. So this is actually about plugging the loopholes in the tax, in the value chain of the tax net, so to speak. So earlier it was just the branded, manufacturers which came under the ambit of the GST, but there was a lot of tax evasion there. So, but now there would be also the unbranded ones, which has a label and which has a packaging in terms of even if it's not sealed, those come under the ambit of the GST. So, and this is not something new. It's not that all essential items have suddenly come under the ambit of GST. So earlier states were also imposing VAT on these items. Like Punjab and Uttar Pradesh were gaining substantially by imposition of VAT on these items in bulk, like rice and flour, etc. So it's not something new that the government has announced. It is just about streamlining rationalizing the entire process of tax collection across the value chain. And there would also be input tax credit that could be availed by various actors along the supply chain. So that is to clarify and put the facts right, which I'm sure viewers who have read and researched would know this, but it's important to put it up front on your show. And regarding the second point of what Ajayji just mentioned, yes, it's about also correcting the entire process of GST collection, because GST itself is undergoing a lot of streamlining across over the years, and it's a very successful case study of the government of India, which where the record collections have happened in GST, and so this is a very big revenue source for the government. Which is not unduly so, because it's also being shared between the center and the states. So the states' eternal complaint that they're not receiving their share is wrong, because the center has been giving the devolution of the shares to the states. And so this is all a process of increasing the collection of the tax revenues for the central government as well as for the state government, and also plugging the loopholes. It's part of all the tax. It's part of actually correcting all the tax evasion that has been happening traditionally across the value chain. So, and also this government has also been very, the kind of budgeting and the kind of, introductions that have been happening are very reactive, and it's also very dynamic. The process of, the reactions of the government to various issues have been dynamic. And so that's the method that actually the government of India is following in their budgeting processes as well. So, which is why it is agile and it's able to react to various situations that happen, time and again, like various crises in the COVID period. We could actually bring in interim budgets, which is all in reaction to the externalities. So, which is a very dynamic and new method of budgeting and economic reactions of the government of India. And as far as state governments are concerned, yes, many state governments have to improve their finances and their sources of revenue. They need to be more creative and also to identify the eligible sources of revenue. Like many of the state governments, like Kerala, etc., they don't have any creative sources of revenue except liquor and lottery and petroleum cess. So they need to improve their, industry taxes. They need to improve taxes on various other things like the fishery sector, the cooperative sector, etc., which Gujarat is very good in imposing and in actually collecting revenues. So if you compare states like Gujarat and Kerala in terms of their state, even the state revenue of the GST collections in Gujarat is very high, whereas a state like Kerala, they're failing in their collection of the state GSTs. So it's all about improving the efficiency of collection of GST. So even here now, it has to be monitored very effectively because it's a very, very fine, element that has been brought in, which is called pre-packaging and label. So that monitoring aspect, the government would have to be very careful in how it actually calibrates this and imposes this tax.
Right, right, absolutely. All right, we'll get into a section now where we get questions from our viewers, and we have one such question. Mr. Shankar, I'd like to take that up with you. Let me first share that question on our screen right now so that we can look at it. The question is by Tenmori. She asks, what will be the effect of GST rate changes, the recent ones that we've seen, on inflation, if any? Mr. Shankar?
This impact will be marginal at best because there are other very powerful inflationary forces acting in the economy right now and with very high inflationary expectations. So this I would take as something which is not very material and would have at best a marginal impact.
Right. So let's widen the scope of the discussion now and talk about another aspect. Since we've seen several of these essential goods come under the GST, on the whole, if you look at it, of course, only the packaged ones will attract a rate of GST. Mr. Shankar, so what kind of an impact is this likely to have on the common man as a whole? Because it seems like, the common man is being further burdened.
You have to see this in a larger context over time. So one thing which government has been encouraging and which other larger forces are driving, which is the formalization of the Indian economy, or increasing the share of the formal sector vis-a-vis the informal sector. Now, packaged food or processed food is clearly being brought under the more formal economy with this decision. So there is a large segment which remained outside the formal system. With this GST tax imposition and the way it's been implemented, they will all come into the formal sector. So it's part of that process of formalization which government is keen to nudge forward. The other point, as was pointed out earlier, is that the formal economy, you are able to check tax evasion much better. And that's a major goal for state governments as well as state government, central government. And the whole GST regime, which is, internet-based, which is digital, it's easier to plug tax evasion. And those who were indulging in tax evasion have now this, knowledge that it's not 1 year's data, they can be caught out at any point of time when software, etc., is becoming smarter. Now, as far as the common man is concerned, certainly there is a mild impact in terms of prices for these items. But as I said earlier, the larger inflationary forces are much greater. So if you see how cooking oil prices went, so high, or other prices suddenly shoot up. So in that larger context of the common man's consumption basket, the impact of this would be marginal. It's a one-time impact.
Right. So time to get another question from one of the viewers. Let's take a question that is coming from Soumya Bharadwaj. Let me share it on our screen as well at the moment right now. So Vineeta, I'd like to take this up with you. We've had about 47 meetings really as far as the GST Council is concerned. It has now been in effect for a few years, 5 years now. So what are some of the key achievements and are we heading in the right direction as far as the GST is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we all, we've witnessed the kind of track record that the GST has gained and the traction that GST has gained over the period of time. So when it was first introduced, we remember the overnight meeting that happened, night-long meeting that happened on the GST Council, the very first meeting. So it was announced by the earlier regime, but it was actually got implemented in this current regime. And we've seen how it has progressed over a period of time and how efficiently and how well it has been implemented. The efficacy of it is displayed very well. And in such a large country like India, with the scale and size with 28 states and eight union territories, and the way it's been implemented, I think is remarkable. And the kind of the collection that is the whopping collection that the government is receiving through the GST regime itself, through the GST itself, is quite good and substantially, it is improved over a period of time. And so I think this is a major source of revenue for the government, not only for the central government, but also the state governments which have fallen in line and which have also, in accordance with the central government's pace, improved their pace of collection and efficiency. I think they've also gained substantially from this. And so I think it has been streamlined considerably. And various other various items have come under the GST after a lot of calibration and a lot of consultation with states. So it's also not that it's been imposed indiscriminately. It has been done in consultation with various states, because the fitment committee itself comprises of representatives from various state governments, from various political parties. So I think it's a very a good example of how a vast democracy like India, challenged democracy like India, is able to implement such kind of a uniform tax structure, which is so important for our rationalization of our budget and for collection of taxes, which eventually go into welfare programs of the government of India, which is why the government of India is robust today in terms of giving out benefits to the people in reaction to various crises like what we saw like during the pandemic when it all played out.
Right. Okay, since we are here now, let's get closing comments from both the panelists as well, with the best way forward and what next. Where do we go from here, Mr. Shankar?
I see this as a major step in completing the GST transformation of the country. Because, as was pointed out, that items which were left out have been brought in. And I think there has been now a greater degree of convergence on where we are, and the next steps would complete a very historic transformation. Because I would like to add that for a federal country to agree on a GST across states was quite a major achievement. And it was based on an all-party kind of consensus, because some party or the other was in power in some state or the other. And it went through a long process. So the transformation of the GST process is, in my view, in the last lap. And hopefully in a few more rounds of decision-making, we would have a settled GST which would be seen as predictable and stable for years, and which would then give greater certainty to investors on how to assess the market situation and how to take investment decisions.
Right. And Vineeta Hariharan, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think giving kudos to the government for the efficiency in which it's been implemented, but also not to be complacent, but look for things that could actually reduce pressures on inflation, like bringing the crude oil and bringing fuel prices under the net of the GST would be the next, I think, important aspect that the fitment committee should consider in consultation with states, and keep on at it and try to pursue states to bring that under the GST regime. I think that will go a long way in reducing pressure to the end consumer. And so I think this is the way to go in terms of GST. I think implementation, it's a remarkable case study of a successful implementation of such a complicated tax regime in such a complicated country like India.
Right.
But I think going forward, the states, going forward, the states have to really monitor the aspect of collection of particularly this particular item of prepackaged food items and labeled items. I think the monitoring mechanisms have to be very efficiently implemented.
Very true. Absolutely. That's something that needs to be kept in mind, and it has to be effective at the end of the day if you want to make it work on a large scale basis. All right, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much to both my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Ajay Shankar and Vineeta Hariharan, a pleasure as always to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it on this edition of the Discourse. But what's coming out of this discussion is that this is something that has not happened overnight. Many states were charging VAT as far as several of these essential goods are concerned, and we've seen the ambit of the GST widen. This means that the collections will go up, which the government can use for public good and will help the finances of the state as a whole, as well as improve the economic condition. Yes, there will be some political backlash. There will be some backlash from certain sections of society, but not to forget that we've had about 2.5 years of the pandemic, which has hit the economy really hard. So some kind of measures need to be taken, and this is one of them. But we should not stop here. We should look beyond this. We have to ensure that more items are brought under the ambit of the GST. Fuel will be one. Second, of course, will be alcohol. And when we see that happening, we'll see true change as far as the GST is concerned. Before I go, let me share a video from the Knowledge Center as well, so that you get to know what's happening there too. And you can enroll to one of our courses that start at just 150 rupees a course.
Cracking UPSC CSC is like running a marathon. To get across the line, you need the right guide and training partner. Look no further than Bharata First Knowledge Center, your one-stop destination for all your competitive exams needs. Classes by the best names and subject matter experts in the field. Courses designed to address all aspects of the challenges at hand. Highly affordable courses priced at less than 150 rupees. Register now at kc.bharatafirst.com or download the Bharata First app now. Avail discounts of over 90%. Happy learning.
So that is the message from the Knowledge Center. As far as the discourse is concerned, you can be a part of it as well. You saw questions being put forth by our viewers, Tenmori and Soumya Bharadwaj as well. Your questions can be taken up in the discourse too. All you need to do is follow the topic that we are going to be discussing on the day and use the hashtag AskFRP. Hashtag AskFRP. Tweet to us and any one of your social media handles, and 2 questions will be chosen for every discussion. So you too can actively participate in the discourse. While I'm here, let me also inform you about My Bharata, another YouTube channel of ours that has been launched a few months ago, which focuses on content which is related to Indian history, Indian heritage, and Indian culture. My Bharata is what it is called. Please log in and subscribe to My Bharata to enjoy all the content that we have there. That's it from me. See you again next time.